So Daryl, just want to say thank you for that, because a lot of the names that you're bringing to my attention are names that are coming to me from different sources as well, and confirming um, that those are individuals that we need to be having conversations with as we build this thing out. So thank you for that.
Thanks, Fabian.
Yeah, man. I mean, look, I've got a whole world of individuals that I'm really looking forward to inviting to our calls, and setting up some meetings for our organization as we take steps forward and having our proof of concept out there. I had dinner last night with an organization that some of us had a call with a few weeks ago, where they showed us their demo, and that team came into town for the Grammys. And they gave me the lowdown of what their ecosystem is going to look like. And, it's quite well thought out, with about 12 different dApps that are all feeding one another. One of them specifically focused on registering songs, done. Another one specifically focused on blockchain publishing apparatus, done. Another one is obviously just music streaming, done. Another one for tickets, and they're going for it.
Hey,
they're going for it.
Sorry, is that Pure Tracks?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
Yep. So they've got something really, really cool that they're working on, and it's intriguing just that they've got one full blown team that's 100% focused on arts and entertainment and music. I think the playing field is getting there's more and more people showing up in the playing field. So it's really quite interesting to see what's happening.
Well, I love it, because what it does is it confirms what we've been saying all along, that this is a right next step for any blockchain platform. And if you can prove yourself out in music, then you can potentially scale out to other more mission critical kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
It makes so much sense, right? Because it's a market that really needs to be rectified. There's so much inequity for musicians at across all the tiers, from the high end folks down to the independents who are just breaking into the mix. So I think it's a place where we can do considerable good, get people self-organizing around a more equitable value proposition for all parties, and do it at scale, and then say, okay, now we're ready to take on another challenge.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I mean, I always harken back, Greg, to words you said very early on in these calls, which is the platform and the possibilities of what we can do. If we get it right with the song, it could translate into how we're able to move medicines and pallets of medication around the world. If we can't get it, but it has to all start really with the song, because if the song doesn't work, nobody's going to die in the process. So if we can tackle this first one, it'll allow us to take steps to go after the next one and the next one, until ultimately we're in that space where we're able to move pallets of medicine into Haiti and make a difference because of our coordination technology. So I get it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I see Mr. Jensen has joined. We haven't seen your face around here in a while. How are you? Rich?
Hey, I'm well. I'm interested to check the temperature of the room, see what people are talking about. I've seen some documentation, but it's been a while since we met in conversation.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really excited by the kinds of projects that you're surveying, and I think it's critical to be able to be aware of these, and such a blessing that you bring particular projects to the attention of all of us participating and viewing. I wanted to. There's a phrase that you use that I think may be important, and not to be way critical, but just sometimes words are very important. And the concept of these projects and bringing them to our chain, that stance of it's kind of like bringing flowers from the garden. I mean, the flowers are already there. If we're seeing a flower, we're seeing wherever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And so I like the idea of making a more complex set of relations to these flowers, and so that partly just seeing them and appreciating them and thinking about them and being inspired by them is one kind of entrepreneurial benefit to draw from flowers that we find on a walk in the woods, if you will, if you go with me on this metaphor. But then also, there may be ways, like just to have, like if RSong can be known for a particular technique of relations and being known as a place that's on the side of creative flowers and they're harvesting and cultivating, there may be what, instead of bringing them to RSong, like if we had an advisory or consulting team that went to a project like the one that you say Hugh Singh is offering in LA and possibly other cities around the world. If we just have that conversation started, and then we have expertise, and maybe as a kind of consultant shop, and we've got our thingy, and we've got friends that we know, and we've got platform partners, like we could be very excellent. And I'm sure this is already the kind of stance that our business development people are using. But anyway, these are some of the thoughts I have about different ways to engage relations without the language being one of capture. Because I think, you like the way to tame a wild animal is not to let it know that you're intending to capture it. You can make friends with it. You can appreciate the flower in the forest. You can water the flower in the forest on a dry day. There are different ways to be friends, and then different ways, because there are such entrepreneurial pressures on the co-op right now. I think as open as we can be and as complex as we can be about building our friendships and finding opportunities and serving talented people, that's our path to a win. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to respond to that comment earlier. Thank you.
Absolutely, Rich. No, thank you for that. I sometimes tend to use words like a warrior A&R guy that's out there in competition to go and capture things. But I hear what you're saying, and I hear we all have very different lyrics that we put into our verses when we speak.
We are very musical beings.
Yes, we are.
That's why focusing first on music as a strategy or a stratagem. I don't use that word very often. I think that's the right word there. Stratagem for building things for people makes sense.
Yes, and that's that is the hope of what we're working towards here at RSong.
You're reminding me. It's not just for grown-ups. So my wife and I, for 5 years, had a music school in Long Island, and we ran a program called Music Together. And I don't know if anybody's aware of that, but it's actually from birth or pre-birth through 4 years old. And the whole idea is community and family and bringing people together through music. And besides being, just a great hour of family music time with these little kids, and it was pretty funny, I think, to see me on the floor with these kids doing music. It's very interactive. It's not performance. It's just making music together. It's transformational, and it's just really interesting. It's not a pitch for them or anything, but the work they do is actually really, really commendable and fits right in. So I don't know who's got little kids, but Music Together is a really cool program, and we ran that for 5 years. So just this conversation reminded me of that, because it's been a while since I thought about that. So.
The space of kids that are in school. I was having a conversation with a friend of mine over at Live Nation, and their division is specifically targeting music education in schools. And we got into a conversation about RSong, mycelia, the idea of being able to have young people start a profile from when they're in high school to track their music classes, that information would obviously fuel their mycelia creative passport, but it would also fuel any musical collaborations that they do in school, and the ease in which they would be able to upload that music, have smart contracts around their songs, and an easy way for which they could deploy to all of their friends in high school. We just wrote this song, we recorded it in the school gymnasium, it's up here on this RSong platform, and how that could potentially work. And they were really, really excited about the idea. And it's one of those spaces that I think quite a lot about. I've mentioned before the idea of Generation Alpha, those that are being born right now, and what is the runway to create an environment that they can walk into, and who are going to be the first ones to actually use a platform that invites in youth culture, that would embrace digital identity, and that would embrace smart contracting. And it's really the space where it's all right now, it's high school students.
Yeah.
And I think about what are the relationships that we have that would allow us access to the high schools across the country. So it's something I've been thinking quite a lot about, especially as I've had 2 conversations with this person, both at NAMM and at Digital Entertainment World, around this idea.
Yeah, well, music has become so, although it's drastically changing in the last 10, 15 years now, that people could actually record in their homes. But, it was kind of becoming very, I'm the performer, you're the consumer of that performance, and this is, and you have to worship me, as opposed to music being a community event, bringing everybody together, because everybody can make music. They don't have to be a musician, right? So
Yes.
it's so transformative, and it's really a shame that so many schools in this country have sought to cut out their music budgets along with their Shakespeare budgets. So I'm kind of hopeful that this movement, and then if the blockchain, if we can support that, community-driven music making, just bring music back to the people, would be really cool.
Well, there's so much support, that there's so much research about how much music and art can influence the development of different people at different stages in their lives. I mean, Einstein was a violinist.
Yep.
And he often talks about how his theories came from listening to music and reflecting on the different ways that, the cosmos and infinitely small and infinitely big functioned. And he often says that he wouldn't have been able to make those discoveries if it weren't for music putting him in the frame of mind, or in the right dimension, I think he might say, to make those discoveries. So anyway, just tossing that in there as a little sprinkle.
Cool.
I have something to toss in while we're talking about beginnings and history. The original record playback system, which may have been Victrola, I'm not sure, but there was a record option, and they got rid of that within the first 2 years. So there goes a giant chunk of history and home recordings that we never got to hear because of some stupid decision.
What device did they take off the record button?
There was a way to record yourself. You could etch into a piece of
On vinyl?
Vinyl. It probably was the early lacquer systems, like what they
and wax. The first recording, one of the first mechanical recording devices was a wax cylinder.
Wax-based, yes.
So it moved along. You spun the cylinder and moved a kind of carving needle, and there's no reason why you can't yell into that big Victrola horn and wiggle a cutting edge on a wax cylinder like a candle that's spinning on its axis. That was the initial playback. Now you only get a few playbacks from wax because it's not as strong as lacquer or vinyl. But that was an early device. But as Steve's suggesting, the entrepreneurial pressures of the time, or the control pressures of the commodity, or the scarcity, the idea of producing scarcity, drove a logic where it's you listen to this device rather than you
participate in this device.
Yeah. Yeah.
You are unimportant. This is important. Caruso is much more important than you.
Amazing.
Well, I'm just I'm sorry. I helped drive this off the rails here, but it's
No, I love the field you drove into. I wanted to go off of a comment that Nora shared in the chat about. I saw that you referenced a meetup by Radical Markets, and it's funny because Radical Markets. I was introduced to the book Radical Markets through RSong community platform developer team member Josh Shane, who is running the Radical Markets groups here in Seattle. And I just wondered, Nora, if you knew more about that. It's very interesting. I can't really tell how much hogwash is involved, but I like it's an attempt at looking at political economy in a way that totally disrupts the 20th century spectrum of left and right. And it focuses on radical markets, radical ideas of building community where people make exchanges.
Yeah, well, I got introduced to it by the same guy. He works for, or used to work for Life ID, or still works for Life ID.
Right.
And then I got introduced to this amazing woman called Rahila Zafar. She works at Consensus. She's been at Consensus since like 2013 or something, so for a really long time. And she got asked by this author, Glenn Weil, who wrote this book about basically looking into blockchain and the future of democracy. And basically they're having a big talk on the 18th. And so I thought that would be a great opportunity for a bunch of people at RSong. But also I've invited a lot of my other friends who are in the blockchain community to come and just see if we can cross-pollinate. And, there's a bunch of different reasons why networking is good. But I think this talk will be interesting. And I was also watching a speech last night actually it wasn't a speech, it was just an interview by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who's a very famous sort of democratic socialist congresswoman in the House of Representatives. And she was talking about how independents are not people who are in the middle of the left to right spectrum of politics. They are people who hate the left to right spectrum of politics. And I thought that was so interesting because I've never thought of it like that before. I always thought independents, who I associate a lot with the radical exchange movement, because they're people who kind of think outside the box and, don't really prescribe to one party or one sort of model for politics. But anyway, I thought that was a really insightful comment. And I think this event will be pretty cool. I'm hoping that a lot of different types of people will come so that we can, strengthen our community here in LA. And I'll let you know if it's hogwash or not. I don't think it is.
I didn't say, I didn't know how much of it might be hogwash.
I'll get back to you with a firm percentage then.
Look forward to it. I posted a link to there's a kind of summary of the basic points of the book at radicalmarkets.com. And there was a particular one that I think I shared maybe in the RSong community about data as labor. Again, a very interesting set of ideas.
Yeah, that point, the data as labor point, is really interesting. And it's going to continue to be a lot more prevalent, I think, as technology sort of continues to take over. I've just read an article saying that Walgreens is considering putting facial recognition cameras in the freezer aisle so that when you go and pick up your ice cream or your frozen pizza, you'll be targeted with ads that match your face, which has been photographed in all these other ways. And it's just like people buy their ice cream.
Actually, that's the dream of every retailer. So when I worked at, when I was consulting for Gap, their dream is that you walk in with your smartphone, you're registered, and while you're shopping through the store, they can send you. Now, to them, it's good things because they're going to send you coupons and they're going to bombard you with things. But every single retailer, this is like the holy grail for retailing, to engage the shoppers while they're shopping. And, I look at it like, it's Big Brother. I don't know, maybe if you're a coupon person, maybe you appreciate that kind of thing. I don't know, it's interesting, but I will tell you every single retailer is working on installing that tech in their brick and mortars.
Well, branding, it's the L word. It's like,
Yep.
it's like, this is our thing,
Yeah.
Especially the expensive markets. No, I work for an
Yeah, so
online
getting back to
company.
RSong and getting back to what we're building, I think it's really important that we think about how we're going to be able to connect directly with people and connect communities directly with each other without them feeling like we've entered into a hell dimension of Black Mirror in which we care to know every single iota. I mean, obviously, everybody's been sending their DNA into these different corporations to have it analyzed to see if they are 5% Mexican or not. Oh God, what a Greek tragedy. And I think it's very interesting, that there are all these corporations that have samples of our DNA and we don't know what they're going to do with them. I don't mean to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but I think there's a way to provide quality services to a community without freaking them out and invading their DNA, for example.
Well, it cues back, I think, at least in my thinking, and you're sparking me to try to clarify my thinking and articulate it.
Uh-oh.
But to the idea of rather than capture. I mean, I think the strongest way to implement a better society would be to be that better society. So if a community could be formed, for example, that was comfortable with fragmentary identity, which I think is one consequence of what we call self-sovereign ID. Self-sovereign means I own my ID. I show it only when and where I want. I control how it gets out into different territories. And I think this is important, and it actually keys off, the idea that Fabian brought a little bit ago in the same conversation just a few minutes ago. He was speaking to high school music students. And on the one hand, that would be amazing if there was a kind of ID that your entire music life, everything you'd heard, everything that had contributed to your relationship to music was documented. I mean, I'd find that quite amusing to be able to remember when I first heard Jonathan Richman or whoever has affected me. But at the same time, if I could participate in a community that maybe didn't care that much to know everything about me, but maybe just that I was at a particular show 5 years ago, before somebody got famous, like if that's all the ID I need to show to be a credential, to participate in a community of fragmentary identities, where we only need to know enough about each other as right now for our community to work, that's the kind of dial of identity transparency that I could live with. And I guess what I'm saying is the way to do that is to implement communities that are using those tools and setting those values and making it fun and pleasant and a better place to live. Because when that happens, if we like it, a lot of people are going to like it. And
yep, I think just to your point, I think in the future, people will be able to pick and choose. They might be able to register every single show they've been to, every single time they've gone to band practice, but you can pick and choose what information you want to make public. What I would imagine being much in the way with Facebook, we post what we want to post, but we're not recording everything. We don't have a creative passport, so to speak, where when we perform at a gig or a rehearsal that it gets stamped, or that we have a decentralized, Polestar reporter, Bands in Town, that allows us to record every single show that we go to. Although Bands in Town, whenever you say, I'm going to attend a show, always asks you to write a review to find out whether you actually went to the show or not. But this ability of being able to pick and choose information that you share, owning your data, owning your information, and especially in the sea of news that's coming out there about how all of our data is being sold all the time. I mean, one thing that I learned recently, just to take a couple of steps back to the facial recognition while buying a frozen pizza comment that was mentioned earlier, I heard from a few people that one of the biggest streaming services is tied in with all of the Amazon shops. All the Amazon shops are able to have facial recognition for when customers go in to shop. It's able to read into the algorithms of what are these 50 people listening to, what are their favorite artists, and if they're able to recognize, oh, these 50 people, about half of them love Bob Marley, they will start playing Bob Marley's music, because they know that if music is being played in the store that you like, you're more open to staying in the store longer and actually shopping and spending your money. And this is one major DSP selling data to Amazon, because our listening habits, as we all know, are all being recorded by these companies, and that data is being shared out there. And it's, I think the work that we're all trying to do is to get to a point where, and it's not just us, it's the greater universe of people that are engaging in the world of blockchain, is to create an environment where our information isn't up for sale anymore. And people don't know what I'm listening to unless I want them to, unless I want to give that information out, because I actually like it that people know what I'm listening to, because I want to be recommended songs that fit into my listener profile. And I feel like just particularly Spotify does a great deal doing that for me. I know Ned has a very different experience when it comes down to the songs that Spotify offers him, but that's another conversation.
But I was in a pizza shop when I first moved to San Francisco, and they were playing the original David Bowie "Man Who Sold the World" album, and I'm thinking, man, they knew I was coming.
There you go. There you go. Amazon sent them had a facial recognition that you were walking down the street and sent them that advance information.
And maybe that's not such a bad thing.
No, certain things,
one of my most favorite albums.
Yeah.
I think it's really important that we get a really solid big picture understanding of the biggest companies in the world right now, and how their business model works. And in that context, I would recommend highly that everyone look into this book that just came out by Shoshana Zuboff called "The Age of Surveillance Capitalism." It is very revealing, and it really kind of exposes the situation that we're in right now and how vital it is that we get out of it. I love the subtitle of the book. It's "The Fight for a Human Future at the New Frontier of Power."
Can you post a link for us?
It is a fight that's happening right now.
I will share a link here for a book that I got an advanced copy of that I think everyone on this call will be interested in, that comes out in 10 days.
Cool.
Yeah, it will help inform inform us as we build the things that we're working on building.
Well, I certainly will say that about this book.
Yes.
I really, really urge everyone to read it, because it's important to know that Spotify is not a music company. Spotify is a data company.
Yes.
And the largest way that these companies make money is out of our data.
Yep.
So it is very vital that the service that we build respects people's data and approaches it in the way that will encourage a new form of capitalism that involves a marketplace where we work with each other and create wealth with each other. I can't remember who it was, but somebody said that the advent of the model that basically says, here, you get this service for free, and in exchange, we get to spy on you.
Yeah. Yep. You can record what you're looking at on your iPhone and share it with other people.
Yeah, and that's how the majority of the biggest 5 companies in the world right now make money.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to solve that. And there are solutions.
I agree. I think all of us on this call agree.
In the chat, I shared a link that RSong community members or co-op members can find. Actually, yesterday, Peter Harris posted it in the sometimes quite quiet Resonate channel. But it's very interesting. Apparently, one of the founders of Spotify, and I forget his name, maybe you remember, Daryl, but gave a talk last week about the implications of AI machine learning for the music space, and was basically, it was an industry panel, but basically saying, hey, prepare for a post-creator, post-fan content world, where the machines have taken enough data to be able to create pleasant music environments for human beings to go about their business in. And anyway, it's a very interesting article, and not fanciful, and coming from someone who's done a great deal to create the current kind of music business world. So it's in there, and if after this chat, I'll post it on the YouTube for people, because I found it really quite illuminating. A little creepy, but the world's full of creepy stuff, and we try to do the best that we can do with our friends, and creepiness inspires us to do better. So
Well, that'll make
I just posted that link. I just posted it right now.
okay, cool.
It's Scott Cohen from The Orchard.
Yeah.
He touches on a lot of subjects. The article's a review of a talk that he did.
Yeah.
And one of the subjects that he touches on at the end is something that I was kind of focusing on, which isn't creepy at all. And let's see if I can find it here. Okay, yeah. So he's talking about social media, and he says, social media is not what it once was. Today, there are only three elements: the users, the platforms, which sell the users' data, and the brands who sell stuff to the users. Imagine a future where we take the brands out of the picture. Younger people are creating their own ad hoc networks already. Blockchain could be the autonomous technology that facilitates an entirely new way of people connecting with music.
Yep.
That's what I was saying.
This is, I think, what all of us have been talking about for weeks.
Yeah.
Months,
Yeah.
what we're talking about.
Decades.
The first step in all of this, really, at least in my mind, is getting the music platform set up, and hopefully people within the community show up and find and develop other dApps that could fuel a larger scale ecosystem. Because there's a lot of work, there's a lot of pieces to this puzzle that'll complete it. And there are people out there that are working on building it, mind you, with different on different platforms, but still the idea of this brain trust that's here and expanded out into the community. We just need to be able to build some things that we were able to see if we can bring this type of vision to life.
Absolutely.
Christian, now might be a good time, if you're listening to, or if you're available, to discuss the fund that you talked to me about a couple of days ago, which I'm still researching, but I thought that was a really cool discovery that you made, and people here might be interested to know about it.
Yeah, I actually don't want to go on that topic on the call.
Okay.
Yeah, but we can talk about that offline.
That's great. Never mind.
Well, Mr. Meredith, what do you think of all of this conversation? You've been more quiet than usual today.
I was really, really enjoying the conversation, and I really enjoy being able to take a listening role.
All right, that's good.
It's rewarding and gratifying to see how many like-minded folks, and how I feel like the message is beginning to spread, and people are taking up the charge. It's only going to work, like if there's one or two voices in the wilderness, that that doesn't represent the change. It only happens if people find resonance in their own experience, and find ways that they can engage and participate. And that's that's that that's essentially what I think everyone is saying, is that, we have to build this from the bottom up. We have to, it has to bubble up from the grassroots, to mix my metaphors. And, and that's, that's the only way we're going to be able to address things at speed and at scale, as if it comes from the people who make and love music. If they can take back the their own engagement, take back the music, essentially, occupy music.
I wholeheartedly agree, Greg.
That's a great hashtag, Occupy Music. That's a great hashtag for the launch of a platform.
That is cool, actually. Yeah.
But the launch of 1,000 platforms.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The launch of
1,000 platforms.
and an ecosystem, the vision.
Yeah, that's right. And so it's, I really enjoy, sometimes listening is the most powerful thing we can do.
So here, high five on that, Greg.
I was reading an article about Alexander Lamar, who was a protege of Baker, and Baker was, I think, the Republican who kind of was the linchpin in turning on Nixon. And Lamar, wrote about Baker that he was an eloquent listener. And that's, I like that. I like that description very much, and I genuinely believe that in the transformative power of listening, in the sense that I think a lot of what divides us can be overcome if we're actually able to listen.
I think it's significant that it's very common to listen deeply one closes one's eyes. And so much of our technological culture is based on visual, and visual is a completely different, there's some deep philosophy on the visual as being very vector driven, where listening, to listen, we close out the visual field, and it's much more about being in vibration with with our surroundings. That's what we are when we listen.
I would like to do a really, really cheesy segue right now.
All right.
So speaking of listening, I just have to throw out a little shout out to Steve Fisk, who I have not met yet in my life, but I see you here. And I just want to say thank you for the work you've done on some of the records that really influenced me. One in particular is the band Low, which were a very important band for me in the 90s. So thank you.
Oh, you bet. And case in point, that's a band that's all about listening.
Yeah, I guess so, hey?
Yeah, no, I've seen them live when people wouldn't stop talking, and you could easily destroy a Low show just by having a conversation with your friend in the back. Low perform probably 4 dBs louder than this conversation. And it was a
Awesome.
wonderful group to work with. Thank you so much.
That's really interesting. Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because a lot of what has shifted in my own musical world is listening to the listening. When I play with other players, you can actually hear when a musical ensemble, a band, or other kinds of ensembles, when they're actually listening to each other. You can hear it, and one of the most gratifying things for me is listening to other people listening to each other.
Yeah.
It's a second order phenomena, but it is really, really, it's completely changed my engagement and experience with music.
Yeah, that's why we still listen to Giant Steps. You know.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
At least I still do. You know.
Yeah, well, that's such an interesting case in point. I don't know if you saw that the recent analysis that was published. Someone who was a non-musician reached out to Adam Neely and one or two other sort of high-profile musicians and music educators to take apart Giant Steps and say, what's going on here. And there's a theory they put forward about the pianist, that the pianist in their solo is just hanging on for, hanging on for dear life. And I never experienced that song that way. I mean, maybe it's true. I don't know, because I just don't know the history of it. But when I listen to it, the sparsity of the piano players playing on that is this perfect counterpoint to the fluidity and stream of notes coming out of Coltrane. To me, there's this lovely, the space created by the piano player's approach to his solo is just perfect. It's like it's the perfect balance to what happens when Coltrane takes the solo. It's really I like spaciousness. I don't know.
Yeah, no, a student was talking to me about that the other day. I hadn't read the article, but I know that whole thing that the piano player was freaking the whole time. Yeah, that's a great way to listen to it.
Yeah, also, he was the youngest musician in the band, so he was the young gun back when him and Elvin Jones and Coltrane were all playing together. He was the young guy.
Oh, that's interesting. That's very interesting. Yeah.
Well, and there's the famous story of Herbie Hancock sitting out on a Miles Davis take because he didn't hear space for him. And Miles Davis respected it so much that he made sure he got an equal participation in the royalty from the track.
Brilliant.
Oh, go ahead.
No, after you, Rudy, please.
I'd be curious to know if anyone knows this, if the levels of live music amplification has gone up over the past few years, or if it's just me getting to be more sensitive and older. Because I went to a concert at, can't think of the name of the place. I got invited to go see a rock band I'd never heard of. They were pretty damn good, but I couldn't hear them because they were so goddamn loud. And I felt the beat in my chest. And I thought, man, when I want to be smacked around, I'll let everyone know, But the thing that I find weird about that is that you can't hear discrete parts very well. And it seems like everyone's relying on sheer force to get the reaction they want. And I just find that unfortunate. But I don't know if the levels have gone up or not.
I think it depends on the venue, depends on the band, depends on the style of music, depends on the sound system that you're in front of. Yeah.
Morton Subotnick, noted composer, still making wonderful stuff, kind of compared the contemporary music environment to the Weimar Republic. Before the war, just before the war happened, there were these clubs that were about overloading all the senses all at once, so that there were colored lights, music as loud as you could possibly make it. There were scents in the air, basically employing all of the contemporary technology to take you out of the world you're from, to put you in this artificial environment, because everybody was shutting down and getting ready to have a giant bad time.
Music for Fortnite.
Yeah, exactly.
Speaking of which, did you guys hear about that that concert that Marshmello did?
No, tell us.
So Marshmello played a concert. It was actually right around the same time as the Super Bowl, which was billed by many as a major flop. Meanwhile, you have in the virtual world on Fortnite, Marshmello playing a 10-minute concert in front of 10 million people in virtual reality.
Yep, it was one of the biggest things that happened in the music industry this week. And add to the mix, at the exact same time that was happening, Marshmello was releasing a song in India with one of the biggest Indian singers in the world. So Marshmello made a big impact this week.
Timing is everything.
Yes, it is.
Yep, there's some major shifts happening, I tells ya.
The link for Marshmello's set is in I just shared it with everybody, so you can read the article and click a YouTube video to actually watch set. You don't have to watch the whole thing, but I think after you watch 2 minutes, you'll understand what they actually pulled off.
I read a book some time ago by Jerzy Grotowski, or about his way of teaching acting. And one of the things he says in there is something to the effect that multimedia usually is a cheap way out. It's trying to have enough stuff happening so that no one notices the weakness in all the pillars of your setup. And I tend to agree with that. I think if you deal with one thing, the music or the visual or whatever, and get it all right, then you can add things in, but it should have an organic need to be there and not just be another orgasm of lights and visuals and craziness. Unless you really know how to do craziness, in which case you're probably some sort of surrealist. But
I gotta say, Rudy, after going to these conferences these last few weeks, and that coupled in with a buddy of mine got an Oculus Rift set up in his home over the Christmas holidays, and I've been spending quite a bit of time in the viewing goggles and in the VR world, and something absolutely remarkable is taking place in that arena, and the depth of programming and creativity and the sense of dimension is incredible. And I think across every single entertainment platform, everybody right now is looking at ways to dive into the VR, AR world, and are building out really significant virtual reality environments, because you have this massive youth market that are all engaged in it. I mean, if we can just see that, just for this DJ, 10 million people went onto a video game and strapped on their goggles to engage with it. So there's certainly a lot to say around how society is losing touch more and more with nature, and spending so much more time in screens and going so deep into the screen that they're strapping the screen onto their face. There's a lot to say about that, but I certainly am recognizing that there's a lot going on within this VR world, and every entertainment company across the board is engaged in it right now.
How are you dovetailing this to what I said? I got lost.
No, I'm sorry. I was inspired by your words, so I wanted to contribute to the conversation.
Oh no. But I was trying to bring it back to the overload situation.
Well, I mean that's the thing, is that what we engage are contexts, and generations come along, and the adults will be divided. They'll say that half the world is abhorrent and half the world I'm making money off, or whatever. The kids come into the room and they don't participate in that. They just see the stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the way to dovetail those two images, Rudy, is to say that you were making the observation that that multimedia, the addition, the creating of a sensation without aesthetic control, is actually a way of absolving oneself from responsibility for aesthetic control. And I'm saying that whether that's true or not for particular individuals, the fact is that there will be up-and-comers coming into that context who, if aesthetic control really matters, and I believe it does, because I think that as human beings we have very sensitive and interesting, subtle impressions and things to say to one another, and we need aesthetic and controls of fluency and legibility at a very high level. We appreciate when that happens, and we appreciate the transformations that can occur. So what I'm saying is I'm looking forward. I don't know whether Marshmello achieved anything besides a quantity of viewers and hopes and that those viewers brought to their performance. But I'll check it out, and it's I'm always optimistic by what humans want to do with their difficult circumstances, and so even if it's a rotten context, humans will come into it and try to say something. Not all of them, not most of them. There isn't often much reward in trying very hard to get it right. But sometimes things go the right way. Now, these are great. This is great conversation today, and I think it's the right kind of path. And then, what makes us interesting as humans is we dream, but then we have to eat. And so, how we can eat to continue to dream, that's the entrepreneurial pressure, and that's really what occupies all of us on the call. I know. So it'll be interesting to see how the adventure continues.
Well, I like all that you just said, Rich. I think my own little bone of contention with the world at large, and it's me against the world, I guess, but not really.
Not really.
The thing that I like to see is our individual efforts, individuals being individuals, and not getting sucked up into a movement. You're going to get sucked up anyway, of course, but you can resist till you hit the waterfall.
Well, movements don't often start as movements. I want to go back to Ned's idea that he brought so early in the conversation about, ice cream freezer surveillance. Well, the first thing I think is like, well, I'm not going to Walgreens anymore. I'll go to some shop that isn't doing that. And it isn't necessarily a movement to have shops that don't do ice cream freezer surveillance until somebody comes along and goes, oh, thank God, every city has at least one ice cream shop that doesn't survey your retina when you buy ice cream. And then it becomes the no surveillance ice cream shop surveillance movement. But it just was a natural order of iterations. And
I see a possibility to publish a guidebook here.
Hey, gentle people, we a lot of us have to jump over to the RSong staff meeting, but I really enjoyed the conversations, and sometimes we have to take these, I just feel like the conversation was in many ways more relaxed and admitted a lot richer dialogue and discourse. We don't always have to be focused on, how do we do the next step in customer intake or whatever it is. This was, I think this was.
We're back to metadata, guys.
That's right. But with that note, I have to jump over to the staff meeting, and I'm looking forward to seeing you guys next week.
Yeah.
Take care, all. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Likewise.